Pat Mayo Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog, the 2026 Canadian Open Research Picks Preview. Get you ready for my national championship, and because it is the Canadian Open week, and people are most definitely, myself included, not taking it quite as seriously as next week's national championship, the year's third major at Shinnecock Hills, which will have a ton of content, per usual, coming down. Grinding starts today for everything. But for Canada, I did want to give a special discount at the Rabbit Hole this week. My entire walkthrough, all my research is powered by the Rabbit Hole at Betsperts Golf. So, if you're new, you can go to betspertsgolf.com right now. If you enter promo code Canada, you will get the Rabbit Hole for 7 days for $1. Highly suggest that you go do that right now. I'll wait. Thank you for doing that and using code Canada at betspertsgolf.com/Mayo to get your $1 a week deal. Maybe there will be a similar discount for next week's U.S. Open. Who knows? But there will be as well. So if you want to jump in now, get yourself acclimated, and boom, you can deploy it for the big money prize pools at the U.S. Open. But I want to talk about the Canadian Open for a second. If you're watching right now, dump your early winner into the description right now. Smash a like and sub to the channel while you're here. But it's weird to see where the Canadian Open is at in 2026, because the Canadian Open was in serious trouble in the mid-2010s. It lost all of its juice. It was played at a bland course, attracting C-level stars only, and Dustin Johnson because of his RBC obligations. Shout out RBC for keeping a big name coming. And Jason Day had played it at one point. He ended up in a final group with David Hearn back when we were really hoping a Canadian could win, and then since Nick Taylor has won. That's great. But the world's third oldest Open Championship and the second longest running event on the PGA Tour really was a benefactor of a series of events that you could not have lined up, and it all started in 2019. Getting change on the schedule from the week after the Open Championship to the week before the U.S. Open was a major coup for the field strength and mainly the schedule importance. Like, none of the top players really wanted to do anything besides not play the week after the Open Championship. We see that with a 3M Open now. But because of that year and moving it to the week before the major, a lot of guys used it as a warm-up event. And RBC started to use some of its money to throw around. Now, unlike the Live Tour, you can't just pay people to show up and play in some of these tournaments. But what you can do is pay players to show up for scheduled corporate events the week of and pay them millions of dollars for speaking appearances. Hence, Rory started playing in the Canadian Open year over year over year. And then he ended up playing in Hamilton. He won by 7 strokes, and people got kind of fired up for it. And Hamilton was a pretty good course. We saw when Bobby Mack won there a few years ago. But just getting it away from Glen Abbey in the suburbs of Toronto, where it's just a crappy course. Having a national open at a real course really does mean a lot. Think about when Erin Hills hosted the U.S. Open, and people hated the U.S. Open for 2 years afterwards because they really hated that course, which was really not its fault, because the primary defense of Erin Hills is the weather, and they got awesome weather that entire week. No wind, everyone was able to take advantage. It's a lot like what we're seeing now with the course of TPC Toronto. If there's going to be some weather coming in this week, then all of a sudden it could get a little bit more dicey than what we saw a year ago. Wouldn't count on that, but that's at least what the hope is. But after missing 2 years following COVID, Rory then, along with all the world's top golfers, returned in 2022 to combat what was the first wave of the Live signing. So we got Scotty, we got JT, we got Spieth, we got everyone, Xander, at that tournament. And it also featured the return of a course located in Toronto proper for the first time since 1968. And the crowds were great, the field was awesome, and Rory won again. Having big stars win your tournament really does go a long way to fuel more people coming back. The next year at Jeff's club at Oakdale, Nick Taylor hit that famous putt to win. It's like a national pride moment at this point. And it had the Canadian players and the rest of Team Europe, with Nick Taylor battling Tommy Fleetwood in that playoff, sitting behind the 18th green. Hadwin runs onto the green when Taylor makes the cut, gets Goldberg speared by a security guard. It was great. It was awesome. He became the first Canadian to win since 1954, and they were both at city courses, which allowed easy access to the course. People could take a subway to the course. So it had, and all those venues are really small. So it felt very claustrophobic. It felt like the crowds were large, and they were large, but it felt even more impactful because of the limited space at a lot of those properties. Then you had the hockey rink hole. It kind of created like a Phoenix sort of vibe, but way more chill than Phoenix. Then it went back to Hamilton in 2024, and because of the Rory influence from the last time he had played, the field really started to take shape as an international all-star game of sorts. Well, the best American players generally skip out to focus on the US Open. Following the Memorial, most of the best worldwide players started making the Canadian Open an annual destination. And another unplanned positive been the timing of the collegiate players turning pro at this event. Morikawa did it in 2019. Ludwig did it in 2023. Last year, Clanton and Gordon Sargent made their first starts at pros. This time around, University of Virginia standout Ben James, bitch, making his PGA Tour Pro debut. And Jackson Koiven probably would have made this a trip north of the border, but he's playing in the US Open next week, and if he gives up his AM status, then all of a sudden I don't believe that he gets his spot at Shinnecock Hills. So, I would probably take that as well if it meant me getting into the US Open, considering he currently has better odds than Minwoo Lee and Aaron Rai of winning the US Open, although Cuss is going to pick him as a sleeper when he's like 15th on the betting board. But you let Cuss kind of go through that. Unfortunately, as predicted, the vibe changed last year with this move to TPC Toronto. It worked so poorly, they're hosting again this year and next year. Because you see, despite the name, TPC Toronto, not actually in Toronto. It's about an hour's drive from downtown in a city called Alton, or it's like Canmore or something like that. So it's not easy to get to, and that's without traffic, which is a real thing. And the crowds were down visibly. It was a larger property, so even if it was the same amount of people, it would have looked really sparse. But in the city courses, like I mentioned, subways, Ubers, whatever it is, you can't do that for the Canadian Open at TPC Toronto. The parking situation really frustrated people, and a lot of people got really turned off by the event being held so far away. Even some of the players, as I spoke to a few of them, that when you play in downtown Toronto, you can stay in world-class amenities, 5-star hotels. You don't really get that. You kind of have to stay at the airport and drive 45 minutes if you want to get out there, if there's no houses available to rent. And this time around, there's a lot of competing factors. We'll see if anyone actually goes to this tournament, because the World Cup starts this week. That's in Toronto, and the Yankees are in town to play the Blue Jays. Those things are downtown. Those things are easy to get to. So I'm not super excited of what we're going to see here. And at this point, calling it the Canadian Open is kind of a farce, because it should be changed to the Greater Toronto Open. This event has been hosted outside of Southern Ontario twice since 2005. Now, I'm not saying it would have saved the league, because we may have saw what we're seeing on Sunday might be the last live that we ever see from some of the reports that I'm hearing, because they're scheduled to take a break, and PIF might, although they said they'd wait till the end of the year to pull the funding, I really wouldn't trust what the PIF have to say. They might actually pull the rug out from live right now, and that's just kind of the end of it. And this last tournament that we saw at Valderrama is it, which is a really good tournament, by the way. Hatton out in the lead as I'm recording this right now. But if they had just went to anywhere else in Canada, Canada is starved for golf tournaments. They've just gone to Calgary or Vancouver. Liv could have had another Australia or South Africa on their hands, the only tournaments that anyone actually cared about on Liv. Now, this time around, Rory's taking a pass because he played Memorial. He's going to take the week off, and then he's going to play the US Open. And as it's coming down at Memorial right now, you had the third round delay that pushed it into Sunday. So guys are going to be playing 27, 30 holes. Some of them only 18, like most of the guys that I bet on here. They're so far back. They finished up their rounds in the third round on Saturday. So they're only going to get their 18 in on Sunday. But what we're seeing, Burns, Cole, Poston, Wyndham Clark, Tommy Fleetwood. As I'm recording this, those guys are near the very top of the leaderboard at Memorial. They're all scheduled to play in Toronto next week. So even without Rory, the field is still really good. Victor Hovland and Colin Morikawa are both listed in the field. They didn't play Memorial last week, which is really weird. I don't understand the Victor part of this at all. I guess he's an international who's playing in the International All-Star game. That's why he's coming to Canada. But Morikawa stuff, apparently he and his wife are expecting their first baby. So I wouldn't count on him necessarily being 100% in this field, because if his wife's going to have a baby, I'm guessing that he's going to WD. Not the first time that would have happened at the Canadian Open, by the way, because I want to say, Hunter Mahan versus Brandt Snedeker, 2013, 2014. Forget when it was, but one of them was winning. I believe it was Hunter Mahan was up by 3 or 4 strokes on Saturday and just left because his wife was having a baby. So there we are. I think he ended up winning the Barclays later on that year, and I bought a new laptop with that money. So, you make those connections in your head. But Colin and Victor are at the top of this field, and they're joined by these internationals. So you got Fitzpatrick, Rose, Fleetwood, Aaron Rye, McIntyre, Noren. Noren's another guy who's near the very top of the leaderboard after a sterling third round at the Memorial. Alex Fitzpatrick, Christoph Reiten, both Højgaards, Lowry, Jordan Smith, Wallace, Harry Hall, Aldrich Potgieter, Rasmus Nergaard Peterson, defending champ, Ryan Fox, all slated to be in the field as a part of the international contingent. And then the Americans, Brooks, Burns, Clark, Bridgman, Michael Kim, Max, 2 of them actually, Homa and Grazerman. Grazerman, good luck this week after bombing at Colonial. Probably time to jump back on Max Grazerman. Eric Cole, Finau, Thorbjornsson, Kiefer, Brennan, Sahith Theegala, Bud Colley. They're all getting passport stamps this week. And then you have your regular contingent of the Canadians, Corey Connors, Nick Taylor, Mac Hughes, Pendrith, Yella Miraju. Plus there's going to be like 10 open qualifiers. The guy that I sponsor to play on the mini tours around here, also my golf coach, he missed out on qualifying again this year. He missed out by a shot last year. I think it was like 3 shots this year. He's going to get in one of these years. He's going to be repping Mayo Media at the Canadian Open. Not that he'll get unless he's playing great, get a ton of screen time. But he played TPC Toronto about 2 weeks ago, maybe even 10 days ago at this point. So he actually shared some thoughts. So let's get to the course and we'll run through what he said about the location, playing it so close to actual tournament time. The course is going to play as a par 70, just a shade under 7,400 yards. That's within 15 yards on the scorecard of the U.S. Open next week at Shinnecock Hills, also playing as a par 70. It's a bent and POA mix, 6,500 square foot, greens, 3 water hazards, 48 bunkers. But I want to pass this along from a guy who played. He said, I know, this is a quote from him, I know that they were prepping for a firm and fast, looking for a first bounce type course, running fairways, probably faders who can stop the ball on command, somewhat like the Ryan Fox, Sam Burns types from last year. Of course, their ball flight is perfect for Osprey Valley, which is the other name. That's what the course is called at TPC Toronto. But with a little bit of rain in the forecast throughout the week, it's going to be a mix of balancing spin control. If that place gets a little soft, because there's a little unique runoff areas and hidden pin locations all over this course. It's also supposed to be really hot, so I don't know if that's going to keep the rain away, and then it'll be even firmer and faster. But the first hop on the greens are really springy. Distance control with your irons is going to be a huge key for the week. It'll be interesting to see which kind of weather hits, though, because that will completely change how the course plays. And although this is a parkland type course, what we're going to see is a lot of really exposed areas. So if the wind does pick up this week, then all of a sudden you're going to be seeing a little bit different in terms of what we saw from a year ago, where it played a little bit soggy. Guys were kind of able to go full hog, and when we get to the stat research at the rabbit hole in a little bit of time, we're going to see that just a lot of different mix of types of players, even in a strong field, were able to propel their way to the very top of the leaderboard. So looking at the holes, there are 3 par 4s, the average distance 191 yards. That's a bit misleading because 2 of them are under 160 yards and 2 of them are over 220 yards. Ryan Fox's only bogey over the weekend on the par 3 11th. He had a birdie over the week on each of the par 3s. The 2 short ones play under par and the 2 long ones play over par. 3 do carry a birdie rate over 19% from a year ago, though, although the really long one bites back with a 7% double or worse rate. 12 par 4s, par 4 scoring going to be very important this week. 459 yards. There's 2 of them under 380 yards and 6 of them over 480 yards. Although that sounds daunting, it's really not a problem for most of this field. Fox made 5 bogeys in the first 2 rounds. 4 of them came on par 4s. The 4 toughest holes are all par 4s. 3 of them are on the back, holes 13, 16, and 17. And the par 5s, there's 2 of them. The average distance, 562 yards, The 18th is actually a par 5, which can unlock everything because they're the 2 easiest holes on the course. Fox made 7 birdies on his 8 chances against them last year. Both of them have an eagle rate over 4% and a birdie rate over 48%. So if you are not picking up strokes on those par 5s, you are absolutely cooked. Ryan Fox won a year ago at minus 18. That was in a playoff over Sam Burns. And as I mentioned earlier, like when you go down and take a look at how people finished in this tournament, essentially what you're looking at, from what I can tell, is you need to cobble together a good tee to green week. Either, it doesn't matter how you do it. Like, you see Kevin Yu's approach was terrible, but he was first off the tee. That led to him being 14th in strokes gained tee to green. Sam Burns, he was good at kind of everything, is around the green play, just like Ryan Fox's. Wasn't all that great, but if you hit a bunch of greens in regulation, you're going to be okay. But Fox was second tee to green for the week by being 6th in approach. You see that Burns was 26th off the tee, 14th in approach, and he was 8th tee to green, but you had to fuse it with good putting. If Matteo Montesero had just putted a little bit last year, he would have been fine. Just like you see, Ben Ann was 4th tee to green, 63rd in putting. Andrew Putnam, he was able to overcome being 135th off the tee by being 34th tee to green, putting 7th. So it's going to be a really random week that we can put as much emphasis as we want behind the tee to green guys. But if you can't mix that with any sort of, you don't need to be awesome putting. You just need to be positive putting. You need to have a good putting week to match it. Because if you take a look at the guys who were the best tee to green last year, Manacero, number 1, came in 6th. Griot, 3rd, but 130th in putting, came T24. Ben Ann was 4th, 63rd in putting, came 6th. Rasmus Højgaard was 5th, tee to green, 144th in putting, came 43rd. Lowry and Smalley, 6th and 7th, both negatives in the putting. Then you take a look at the tee to green guys who actually made a few putts, and it's not like Ryan Fox was first. He was 24th in putting. That was good enough. Sam Burns, 13th in putting. That was good enough to come in second. You see Nick Taylor, if he hadn't finished 70th in putting, all of a sudden he would have finished better than 13th. Trey Mullenix was 12th in putting or tee to green last year, 132nd in putting, comes T43. Cam Champ, 34th in putting, 9th. Kevin Yu, 8th in putting, 13th. But it just needs to be the big positive. You can't have that big negative coming in. Now, and you can ride yourself with a bunch of hot putting if you really want to. Matt McCarty didn't really do anything well except for putt. He was first in putting, came T4. Then you see that Thorbjorn Olesen, who was the first round leader last year, came second in putting, ended up coming T36 because he just couldn't do anything well. You can't be 124th tee to green, but Matt McCarty was 45th tee to green. It didn't make that big of a difference for him. So I think when we're attacking it this week, I think looking at Myrtle Beach will be somewhat instructive because this was very similar to how that tournament ended up coming out. Now, obviously, it's going to be a different course, but if you can do two things well, or if you can do one thing really well, another thing moderately well, and the other thing okay, that will lead to a high tee to green total. Or if you can do one thing amazingly and not be a disaster in some of the other tee to green locations, then you can do it. But you have to be able to combine it with some decent putting. And when we take a look at this leaderboard, you see Ryan Fox, Sam Burns. So Ryan Fox, reasonable putter, putted pretty well coming into play, and it just won at Myrtle Beach, by the way. Sam Burns, historically known as a great putter. Kevin Yu, not so much. This was the beginning of a good run for Cameron Young when he kind of flipped the putter around. Obviously, we know what this led to. If he had just got it up and down on that 18th hole, he would have been in that playoff as well with Fox and Burns, but he could not pull off that shot from behind the green after airmailing it and 2 over it. Matt McCarty, a fantastic putter. Manacero, Ben Ann, terrible putters. Andrew Putnam, pretty good putter. David Skins, he's hot or cold. Lowry, terrible putter. Smalley, getting better now, usually a terrible putter. You got Ludwig, Taylor, Kevin Roy. So it was hard to predict coming into the week. Outside of Burns and McCarty, and I guess you could call Cam Young, although we did not know it at that time that he would have turned his entire putting career around, that most of these guys are kind of shit putters. So trying to focus on tee to green, be it either big driving or big driving gain, don't necessarily need to be the longest, but you need to gain driving or on approach. Those are the two things that we're going to look at. So when we come back from the break, we're going to analyze the field, and we're going to try to take a look on the rabbit hole, see if we can find some guys both near the top or down the board that we can back for the Canadian Open this week. Stay tuned. Summer's actually the time of year when I notice bad sleep for me the most, because the days are longer, the kids are running around nonstop, they're staying up later because it's so gloriously bright out throughout the course of the night, and then they tell me, it's not bedtime, it's not dark out, although that logic never applies in the wintertime when it gets 4:30 p.m. dark out now, does it, kids? But I'm outside more. I'm playing more golf. And if I don't get a good night's sleep, I feel awful the next day. It's one of the reasons I've been so happy with my Helix mattress. I've now had mine for a couple years, and it's been a massive upgrade from what I was sleeping on before. I fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and I wake up feeling far more recovered. That's the important part. When you're trying to squeeze the most out of your summer, which I have to where I live, it's a pretty big deal to me. What I really like about Helix is they make it easy. Just take their sleep quiz and they'll match you with the mattress that's right for you and your sleep style and preferences. And the summer sale is going on at helixsleep.com right now. So go to helixsleep.com/Mayo for 20% off site-wide. That's helixsleep.com/Mayo for 20% off. Make sure to enter the show name at checkout so they know we sent you. Travelers Championship. Now is the time. This is the place. Every star, every round, every shot that makes your heart race as legends walk the fairways. Keegan Bradley, Scotty Scheffler, Tommy Fleetwood, Justin Rose, Cameron Young, Xander Schauffele, Colin Morikawa, and other PGA Tour greats, all battling to be called champion. See the world's best for all 4 days. No cut. You'll feel the pressure before the shot, the roar when it drops. You'll stand close enough to see it all, the intensity, the focus, the moment when everything comes down to mere inches, and where everything makes you feel part of the moment. It's golf at its best, up close, open to all, and only here. The excitement starts June 24th and runs through June 28th at TPC River Highlands in Cromwell, Connecticut. For tickets and information, visit travelerchampionship.com. Now is the time. This is the place. We're back once again. $1 for the rabbit hole for this week if you use code Canada at betspertsgolf.com. What I want to do initially is just kind of take a look. I'm going to clear the models that I've created so far. We're going to delete everything and we're going to restart from scratch and start adding things in. We're looking at the past 6 months. Let's shrink that down to the past 2 months. Who is coming in with pretty good form at this time? We can also take a look at the recent form tab, and it's not Mike Weir, I'll tell you that much. But let's see here. If we go average strokes gained per round, I mean, if someone has a bad tournament, that's going to be bad for them. But you see Eric Cole coming in fantastic form, T6, T2, and he's currently inside the top 10 at Memorial as I'm speaking right now. We'll see if he continues to play. If he doesn't win at Memorial, I think that he's going to keep pressing at this point in time. Wyndham Clark having another great week coming off of his win at the CJ Cup. Byron Nelson, Mac Meisner. See, Mac Meisner is kind of what I was talking about, the type of player that can cobble together everything for one good week. Like the driving is not going to be great, but it can be close. The ball striking is going to be good. The tee to green is going to be good. We've seen this. The chipping's good. The approach is good. He can put together two of those facets and be okay off the green. And he's now gained on the greens in 4 consecutive weeks. Like, this is a type of player that can do some damage at the Canadian Open, because we saw all the great players play last year. It's not like they weren't there. None of them outside of Sam Burns. I mean, is he really even a great player? I think he was like 30-1 in that tournament last year. Like, that had Rory. That had Bobby Mack. Like, the good players played. They just didn't do well at this course. I don't know if, at that point in time, it was for a Rory lack of effort going into it. However, the other guys, they were trying to win. You saw Ludwig and Lowry up on that leaderboard, but the very top just did not feature any of these names at all. So we can be looking down the board here. Maybe that was a one-year aberration, or maybe this course is so easy that it just kind of rewards hot putting, which is somewhat unpredictable. Rye, Snedeker, Patty Harrington is in the field. There's Brooks. Brooks is playing. Bausch's actually turned in some nice results recently. The issue with him, and maybe if you do want to back someone who can't putt, it might be with him. Let's see what his putting splits are like. Better on Poa and Poa Travalis. So we're getting a blend this week. It's not on Bermuda, which is probably good news for him, although he did just lose a bunch at the Charles Schwab on Bent, but gained a bunch at the Byron Nelson and Myrtle. And he lost at Myrtle Beach as well, so here we are. But the ball striking has been really good, mainly through the approach, just overall tee to green. He's been really, really good in that regard. See Fitzpatrick. Mark Hubbard may or may not play in this tournament, according to his brother Nate. He was hospitalized over the weekend. They said it's not super serious, but he might not be playing in this tournament, so keep an eye out on that. Superman, Jackson Suber, feel like he had been running a little bit better. Let's see here. How was Suber? Suber was 4th at the Byron Nelson at the Schwab. Oh, it was the final round that really did him in. He had a bad round 1, bad round 4, but rallied really well in between. Could not get his putter to match, which is weird for him because well known as a decent putter. You can see if you go back over the years that it's been somewhat in the negatives, but it felt like he had been running good for a decent period of time. Maybe I'm just off on that. It has not been good recently, but yeah, there we are. Yeah, through the last part of last year, even at last year's Canadian Open, where he was T20, it started off a good run at the Schwab, where he gained almost every week outside of the 3M Open, and then the putter flipped back. But we've seen him gain in 2 of the past 3 starts. The results are starting to come around a little bit more, and his approach play has been really good. Off the tee has been really good. Can't really chip, and that's been a thing throughout his entire career. I wouldn't put too much stock into that, though, because these greens are 6,500 square feet. You can hit greens in regulation at this course. Not the end of the world there. Wrighton, Taylor Moore, the Gim Reaper, Bo Hossler. Then you got Morikawa, who just really hasn't been doing much of anything as of late. AJ Ewart. I don't know if this is going to be a better... I like to compare the Canadian rookies between Ewart and Yella Miraju. Yella Miraju's kind of hitting the skids a little bit lately. Ewart, on the other hand, has 3 top 20s in his past 4 starts, was cut at Myrtle Beach, but showed up at the CJ Cup and the Schwab, both top 20s at those tournaments, and those are 2 completely different courses. So when I start to think about the types of players, I thought that he would have been better at a Colonial versus being good at a Myrtle Beach. I mean, this is a guy that won Q School last year. He's a real dude. And you can see that the results have been, piling up pretty well. Cut at Myrtle Beach, cut it in Houston, which would probably compare more to these tournaments in all honesty, and that's not a good sign that he was cut from those. But T11 at Valspar, Valero T30, and the 2 top 20s coming in. See how he did this tournament last year. He was cut the past 2 years, or past 2 events at this course, but obviously in 2022, that was at St. George's, so I wouldn't put too much into that. Last year, it was terrible off the tee, terrible on the greens, losing 2 strokes per round, so over 4 strokes lost putting. He's been putting the lights out this year. So if there's someone who's going to get by merely through putting, it would be him. Although I do know a lot of his heavy lifting at the Charles Schwab Challenge approach-wise was from round 2 when he had a hole-in-one and gained 3.85 strokes on approach. The other rounds he was kind of terrible. So maybe not coming in, and maybe the form is a bit worse than maybe we're looking at. I'd probably rather take a chance on Baushu versus him because the approach play has been so good. Maybe he can turn the putter at this event, or even someone like Jackson Super, who seems to be trending upwards at this point. So overall, we take a look at the recent form. Cole, Clark, Meisner, Rye, Brooks in strokes gained total. So let's throw that in. Short-term form. When I have Keith on a little bit later on this week, we can take a look at that as well. So one of the things that I really like to do on the rabbit hole, and you can too, with code Canada at betspertsgolf.com, hit the description, boom, you get in there, get it for a week, is go back to the last year, we'll call it the past 18 months, and we'll just sort by TPC Toronto at Osprey Valley, the North Course, and we'll apply that, and we'll click over to active golfers. And then we can take a look at how the leaderboard shaped out from last year, and we'll hide the salary because there are no salaries that are out as of yet, and take a look, at Ryan Fox. Where did these guys do well? So this is what I was getting at earlier when I was talking about you don't really see one dominant skill set. Fox, Burns, Cam Young, and Kevin Yu, all very good off the tee players. Burns more for his distance than anything else. Same as Fox, but they didn't gain a bunch of strokes off the tee that week. Kevin Yu and Cameron Young did. They parlayed that with good putting, and that was good enough. You can see the approach play was not good for either. The around the green was not good for either. Ben Ann kind of did the same thing, but instead of putting, it was chipping for him. But he was, he's another guy who, long and straight off the tee. Cameron Champ, bomber. Then you see a bunch of guys who are not bombers, but good fairway mavens and guys that can kind of pick it up off the tee a little bit. So off the tee, I would say outside of some outliers here, either through distance or through accuracy is probably the route that you do want to take this week to generate some of these scoring opportunities. It's a par 70. It's almost 7,400 yards. It's not a short course by any means, but that doesn't necessarily play itself out when you take a look at the off the tee, because when you see the driving distance, Goddard, it's funny because this was the beginning of Goddard when you go back to the Canadian Open last year, and he missed the cut, which is funny to think about, but this is why people ended up betting him at the Scottish, and I think people were on him at the U.S. Open last year too. But when you go back and take a look of him getting cut, It was a start of a really nice run for Chris Goddard, who is the only bet that I have to win the U.S. Open right now at 45-1. But you saw that the results started piling up for him. 13th at Myrtle Beach, 18th, and the off the tee was really good. But then the approach started getting out there. The approach was lacking, which we've seen from him in the past, and the around the green had consistently been good. But it's the putting just going to take you out of so many of these tournaments when you're so far in the negative. But he shows up at the Canadian Open and loses 2.5 strokes. Putting, loses a stroke over a stroke around the greens. But you see this ball striking total. For 2 rounds, 4 on ball striking, gained a ton off the tee, a little bit on approach after gaining a bunch the week before at the Charles Schwab Challenge and just couldn't make a cut. In the U.S. Open, it turns around for him a little bit. Gained 6 strokes off the tee, very positive tee to green. One of the leaders for the week. Tee to green, but still couldn't make any putts. Then you get to the Rocket Classic and the John Deere. He starts doing the same thing. He starts becoming, this is what I look for in Michael Brennan, honestly. And this is why I continue to bring up Michael Brennan, that he just gains so much off the tee consistently week over week. 5, 1.5, not great. 3, 6, 2.5, 4, 4.3. And then he wins at the Scottish, because it all comes together with a great putting week and the chipping turns out really good. The approach wasn't even all that good any of these weeks. When you play a game like this, your approach doesn't need to be amazing if you can ride it with a hot putting week. And that's what he did at the Scottish. He gained a bunch off the tee, enough with his irons where he wasn't in the negative. Gained a bunch around the greens too. Those were great green surfaces and green complexes for him because he turned out to be a very good around the green player. Then gained 7 strokes putting, boom, you win. Open Championship the next week, gained 6 off the tee. This is also how Bryson wins a lot of tournaments, honestly. Like, do we ever think of Bryson of being an amazing iron player? No, because he's not. Some weeks he's like pretty good. Some weeks around the green, he's pretty good. But when he wins tournaments, he fuses off the tee with amazing putting, and that's how you end up winning tournaments. And this is just a great run of off the tee for him, and it's been a great run ever since for him. Even winning at the Sony, over 4 off the tee. Wins in Phoenix, over 4 off. He lost strokes putting in Phoenix and ended up winning because he had a great approach week. He lost strokes on approach at Sony, didn't matter because he gained 5 strokes on the green that week. But when you consistently can write in these numbers off the tee, all of a sudden you're looking really, really good, and you have parts of your game that don't need to be as stellar, and you can spike in any of the other parts. You have a great chipping week, a great putting week, a great iron week. That's how you start finding winners. What is that reliable skill set? And can you have an outlier week somewhere else? Then he had a bad run after getting that win, so bad off the tee. I mean, good, he was positive off the tee, but not amazing off the tee at Pebble Beach, Riv, Bay Hill, or the Players. It was a bit of a lull coming off of 2 wins that, frankly, shouldn't be all that surprising. But since, outside of the Truist, it's been back to regular form for Chris Goddard, who's not in the field. This is the highlight that I want to put up as an example here. We start looking at some other players. Think about how much you can get away with if you're just mashing it off the tee. He came 38th, albeit at a no-cut event, but it's still against the best players in the world because he gained a bunch off the tee, but he lost 6 strokes on approach that week. At the Truist, he starts gaining a little bit. Now his putter is back. He's gained 7 of 8 tournaments on the greens. This is why I like him next week for more of those future bets. You can go to coolbet.com, find that 45 hanging on him right now. Maybe by week of, because he'll be out of sight, out of mind because he's not playing in the Canadian Open. Maybe you can find him with a better number that week, but I really like Chris Goddard at Shinnecock Hills, and he comes in pretty good form. T14 at the Truist, and that was with losing strokes off the tee, and then T10 at the PGA Championship, where he just kind of mashed off the tee, mashed on approach, and continued to gain in the putting realm. Another thing that you can find, just as a quick aside, the live leaderboard on Betsperts Golf. One of the things I would highly recommend. JT Poston's currently winning here. He's through 14 holes of the 3rd round on a Sunday morning, -12. I did not think the Memorial, listen, as much as we can do these research shows, did not expect a Poston versus Gerard final round with them up by at least 4 strokes. But Goddard was making a run early. Let's see here. Yeah, he's currently 27th place. Let's see what he's doing for the week. For the tournament, if we take a look at total, he's been bad off the tee, he's been bad on approach, but he's still putting the lights out. So I like to see him running this hot putter because you can turn it around at a moment's notice with a lot of this stuff, especially because of his elite upside with his driver. So that's what you're kind of seeing here. Goddard, Ludwig, Cam Young, Mullenix, all really good drivers of the golf ball, and they finished 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the overall strokes gained off the tee board Goddard did it in 2 rounds last year in strokes gained off the tee. But those guys are all bombers. We saw Rasmus Højgaard be up there tee to green as well. Then you saw some of the other guys. David Ford was up there last year, ended up missing the cut. Champ deep off the tee. Connor's not deep off the tee, but still ended up 14th for the week. Nikolai 16th. So I would lean towards those big strokes gained off the tee guys historically, because even if we search by Ryan Fox, who did not have a great week, off the tee. He was fine. It was in the positives, I believe. What's he on average? Yeah, Fox gained a quarter stroke per round. So he gained a stroke for the tournament, drove it 110 yards off the tee. He's not short by any means. Positive in distance, still gained off the tee. But overall, like when he's running at his best, that's what he does well. You can even see by his past 8 rounds, he's been really clicking up. Overall, throughout the years, it's inconsistent for him off the tee, but generally a very good off the tee player. It's just, you can even see coming into it right now, gaining a bunch at the PGA Championship. He gained a bunch at the Truist. He gained a bunch at the Cadillac. So he's riding a hot form coming in off the tee. Let's see what he was doing at this point last year. Where are we at? 2005. Gained a bunch at Myrtle Beach. Gained before that at the Byron Nelson. So he had been riding in pretty good form. We saw the approach play really tick up for him, and that he was able to match some putting with some pretty good approach play throughout the course of those weeks leading into it, starting at Myrtle Beach. So he's someone with a lot of distance off the tee that I think that's where I would want to be this week. It's not necessarily a bomber's track, but I do think that bombers have the easier path in if they can match it with the hotter putting. So this is a way that you can take a look at the course from last year to see how everything went. We can take a look at approach, take a look at rank. It was Griot, Manacero, Shane Lowry, John Pack, my guy, double studs. John Pack, there's Ryan Fox, 5th for the week. Victor Perez, he's up there as well. Alex Smalley. We saw a lot of these names near the very top of the leaderboard, but we saw a couple of these guys legitimately putt themselves out of the tournament. Griot, Manacero, and Shane Lowry. I have no idea what happened to John Pack. I just assume he couldn't putt either because he can never putt, or he has had a terrible week elsewhere. Let's see. Canadian Open last year, and this was coming off being the first round leader at Colonial a year ago too. Yeah, just couldn't putt, couldn't chip, couldn't drive. The only thing he could do was hit approaches that week. But he did come T27, so shout out to my guy, John Pack, from last year. But this is the way that I like to assess the leaderboard and go through everything. We can find out, we can find the spikes, we can find the putting ranges. Let's see in putting. Actually, let's take a look at putting ranges, see if anything jumps out there from a year ago. Luke Clanton, so outside 10-foot putting. Tim Whiting, wow. Patrick Rogers, Justin Rose, there's Ryan Fox, Matt McCarty, Kevin Yu. So this, you got pretty lucky, making a lot of putts outside of 10 feet. If we just go to 10 to 15 feet, do we see those similar names? But we saw Putnam at the top of the leaderboard. There's Fox, there's McCarty, there's Victor Perez, who finished very highly on that list as well. Wyndham Clark, if he just had been a little bit better last year, could have got himself into the mix. Johnny Kiefer, another guy who was T3 here when they played it as a Fortinet Cup event. I'll have more information on that in my research article that's going to be coming out on Sunday evening. Subscribe to that for free down in the description. You can get that sent directly to you. So this is just what we were looking for, looking through, going back to last year's tournament. You can look at the par 3 and par 4 efficiency. I bet if I search by par 4 efficiency, we're going to find some of the names near the top of the leaderboard. And, oh, shocker, there we are. Ludwig was 13th. First in par 4 scoring, tied with Max Homa, who missed the cut. Probably, how the hell did Max Homa miss the cut here last year? And being first in par 4 scoring. That doesn't line up at all. Let's see. Good putting, terrible approach play, terrible chipping. Interesting. How's Max been doing recently anyway? Let's take a look. The off the tee has been, I don't want to say solved for him, but gaining in 4 of 5 tournaments, good for Max Homa. Has lost 5 consecutive, and badly too, on approach. So, but here's what's interesting about it. Now, he came T22 at the Charles Schwab. He's been lighting it. So Max Homa, weirdly, when we take a look at these, I'll put it up on the screen now. So Max Homa's in the field this week. I can't remember whether or not he's in the field at, I don't think that he's in the field at the, the Memorial right now. Let me take a look to see if he's in the field. Max Homa, is he playing? Doesn't seem to be, no. Okay, so he's only been playing signature events and majors, which is weird for a guy with very little status, that he's not trying to pick this stuff up. So you can see that at the one that he played that was not a signature event or a major, the Charles Schwab Challenge, he ended up coming T22. How do you do it? Driving and putting. very reminiscent of what we saw from a lot of the top of the leaderboard last year. It was terrible around the greens, which has been a trend for 2 straight weeks now. Now, maybe he can't chip at a bent, who knows? But it was pretty good before that. The iron play has been absolutely ravaging him. But the Charles Schwab was the first event that he played that wasn't a signature event or a major since the Valero Texas Open on April 4th. I mean, that's a bit of time. So his approach play has been disastrous, but he's been playing at tough courses against the best players in the world. So Heritage, Cadillac, Truist, PGA Championship, all deeply in the negatives. Broke even with the field last week. He was just a pure 0, and that was good enough to come T22. If he can get back to what he was doing earlier on in the season against, at the Players, he was pretty good, and so was the Masters. But Valspar, a weaker event. The COG, a weaker event. Farmers, a weaker event. Amex, weaker event. Even Bank of Utah, going back to last year, a weaker event where he gained on approach. If he can do that and match what he's been doing otherwise, Max Homa could be pretty good this week. I find it hard to believe that he's just going to turn it on with his approach because we have not been seeing that as of late. However, the rest of the game kind of lines up for what we're looking for. Almost back to that Goddard example of you're doing these two things really, really well. Can the rest of your game spike somewhere else and you can match it up? That could be something that we're looking for right here. So interesting to see with Max Homa because he was first in par 4 scoring last year. So Vic Perez inside the top 10, Manicero inside the top 10. Ryan Fox was your winner a year ago. Luke List missed the cut despite being 5th in par 4 scoring. Good for him. Cameron Young was 4th, was 5th in par 4 scoring. McCarty and Kevin Yu, 5th and 11th. They both finished inside the top 5. Alex Smalley was T15. David Skins, Ben Ann, they were both inside the top 10 last year. Lowry was inside the top 15. Sam Burns. So if you're not scoring on par 4s at this course, you're absolutely cooked. Did that translate to birdies or better? Or was it just par 4 average? Let's peek here. Ryan Fox, 5th in par 4 scoring. 31st in par 4 birdies or better. So you can see a lot of these guys just treaded water on par 4s, then did their damage on the par 5s. As I mentioned, birdies on 7 of the 8 par 5s for Ryan Fox. If you were not making mincemeat of those easy holes, then all of a sudden you weren't doing well. Because you can see the par 4 birdies or better leader, Goddard, Rory, Nicholas Norgard, but they made bigger numbers. They just made big numbers, despite the fact that, look at this. William Mao, the chairman, first in par 4 birdies or better, 62nd in par 4 scoring average, 48th in strokes gained on par 4s. Until you get to Homa, who was 22nd and first, then Ludwig, you're going way down the list when you look at birdies or better. Now, a lot of these guys are players who miss the cut, so their numbers are skewed a little bit. Even Mac Meisner was 19th in par 4 birdies or better last year, but just couldn't get it going at all. See if any of these ranges pop up. Par 4s, 450 to 500 yards. There's Victor, there's Ludwig. Don't see Fox. Where's Fox rating on all of these? Fox and Burns, if we take a look at them. So you see Fox was 21st in par 4, 450 to 500 yards. He was 21st there, and then 10th in over 500 yard par 4s. And obviously ate up the par 5s at the same time. If we take a look up here at the very top of 500 yard plus par 4s, doesn't seem to be much correlation, as some, but there wasn't a whole lot of holes from that distance either. It was mainly in this 450 to 500 bucket where it wasn't necessarily a correlation to guys that played well there. It was just overall par 4. So that's instructive to know. When we come back, we're going to build out the model and try to figure out if we can find some of these guys that we need to have at the top of our list, at the top of our tongues at the RBC Canadian Open. Stay tuned. Starting something new is terrifying. I remember right before launching this show thinking, what if no one listens? What if it completely flops? And that's something that has persisted every time that I hit record and go to edit a show, even as I'm recording this right now. It never goes away. But taking that leap ended up being one of the best decisions I ever made. And honestly, having something like Shopify back then would have made it a whole lot easier. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses. Whether you're just getting started or scaling up, you can build a clean, professional store with ready-to-use templates that actually match your brand. no coding headaches. And it's not just a storefront. Shopify's got built-in AI tools to help write product descriptions, improve your pages, even upgrade your images. Plus, you can run email and social campaigns right from the platform like you've got a full marketing team behind you. That would have been great like 15 years ago, not gonna lie to you. Best part, everything lives in one place. Inventory, payments, analytics, so you're not juggling 5 different tools to run your business. It's time to turn those what-ifs into with Shopify today. Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/PatMayo. Go to shopify.com/PatMayo. That's shopify.com/PatMayo. Season's changing, which means I need to flip my entire wardrobe, and I looked at my closet and I started thinking, why do I own so much junk that I never actually wear? I've been trying to scale it back. Fewer things, but better stuff. And honestly, that's why I keep going back to Quince over and over. Their pieces just make sense. The fabric feels legit, real quality, not that fake premium marketing nonsense that they send me on Instagram. That stuff sucks. What you want is super breathable, really comfortable clothing that looks sharp without trying too hard. Even the Flow Knit activewear. That's the sneaky one for me. It's soft, moisture wicking, doesn't stink, and you can wear it all day and not feel gross, which is a big win for me. The kicker is the price. It's like 50 to 60% less than what you'd expect to pay for this level of quality because they cut out the middleman and go straight to the source. So you're not paying for a logo, you're paying for good clothes. Refresh your wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com/mayo for free shipping and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/mayo. Quince.com/mayo. We're back at betspertsgolf.com and code Canada for $1 off or $1 a week at the rabbit hole, and that gets you access to the optimizer, the old school fantasy national lineup generator, custom matchups, tournament simulations, that live leaderboard, player projections, the course database, the Discord chat. It's all in there if you're looking for it. Highly recommend. Jump in for the week for $1 at betspertsgolf.com. We already threw in recent. Let's see what we got. If we go to create model, this is all I got in so far. I got short-term form. Okay, and I don't even have it weighted so far. So we need to add other things. It seems like par 4 scoring is where we want to get to. And I had this discussion with Keith on the Final Word last week about short-term versus long-term and some of the stats that we're looking for. I think that's a really cool off-season project. We can look at it, especially with someone who runs regression models. And I know that people do them in different ways or how they weight out their model. But Keith and I both had the similar observation that we believe that short-term approach, not saying that long-term approach doesn't mean anything, but short-term approach when you're looking for streaking players, just like recent form, is going to be more predictive than just taking a sample of the past 2 years in that particular stat. However, something like around the green play is probably better off weighted for a longer-term sample because that's more of a baseline skill that you're going to have that doesn't seem to ebb and flow week after week. It's just like long-term strokes gained off the tee. That's such a repeatable stat using your driver. And this is, I believe, we can take a look here at the course data from what we had a year ago. Is this a driver heavy course? I would bet it is. Yeah. Driver usage last year, 81%. So guys are going to be hitting driver a ton this week. That's something that we can actually bake in to what we're looking for at the rabbit hole. So we said that strokes gained off the tee is something of importance that we want to find. So we'll just put in last 3 months strokes gained off the tee. So we'll add that with this little button here. We'll go off the tee last 3 months. And we'll throw that in. The leaders right now in off the tee over the last 3 months: Michael Brennan, number 1, Bobby Mack, Neil Shipley, Keith Mitchell, Rico Hoey, or Hoy, as I used to like to call him. Still do, kind of. Gim Reaper, Jordan Smith, Wrighton, Moore, Svensson, Rasmus Niergaard, Peterson. There's Johnny Kiefer. Probably a pretty good look this week. Brooks Koepka, Alex Fitzpatrick. Oh, the stanger. Sit on your hand and give yourself a stanger, Jimmy. He up there. Pendrith, Fleetwood. And Nikolai Højgaard. If I had to guess, I'm going to guess that Nikolai Højgaard is going to be a very popular play this week. Someone who he kind of fits that perfect mold of off the tee approach. He can chip a little bit. Can he spike with putting? Well, his putting had been getting better before this week, but that's a player that we would look at here. Robert McIntyre kind of fits that mold of off the tee, putting, can he spike? I mean, he's kind of the perfect example of what we looked for in that Sam Burns mold, that you just kind of see it every week with him. Off the tee, it's all positives. He has not lost strokes off the tee since last year's BMW Championship, and he rarely does not gain a bunch of strokes putting. It rarely happens. He lost the PGA Championship in the Truist. That sucks. But other than that, 2, 4, 2, 5, 2, 3.5, 1.5. So he'd only lost strokes twice this year. That happened to be 2 of his past 3 tournaments. Sucks on approach, pretty good around the greens, but we've seen the spike weeks on approach. That is the path that we're looking for guys at the top of this tournament. So one thing that we can do here before I forget. So I added in strokes gained off the tee. The only other thing I want to do is take a longer sample of this. We'll go to the past year. We'll filter by conditions, and we will throw in, where is driver heavy? Club off the tee. It's a driver heavy course if we're using driver over 80% of the time. And we're just going to go to strokes gained off the tee for that as well to see if that gives us anything different. So Shipley, Brennan, Nikolai, Thorbjornsen, Kiefer, a lot of similar names. So we're not going to overweight that to much extent. Driver heavy, throw that in. And, we can play around with this when we get to the settings and the weightings that we put into the model. But I just thought that was an interesting thing to look at from that regard. We'll go back to 3 months. We'll go back to conditions, and we will reset the filters. The other filter that we can take a look at here is course length. We're going to go long to very long, and we're going to go scoring conditions, easy, very easy, and average, because I don't think this is going to play difficult. Look, if the wind shows up and it plays difficult, then, we're screwed. We don't have a lot from this range, so we are going to have to go back to the past 18 months to look at this to give us some sort of sample. And even guys like Alex Fitzpatrick, albeit he hasn't played much on tour, 8 rounds. Fleetwood only has 12 rounds. Maybe this isn't the best thing to look at now that I'm digging into it a little bit more, because Fleetwood generally only plays more difficult courses. Who has the most rounds here? So a sample of 31 for Kevin Roy, and this includes Punta Cana, where we don't have strokes gained, but we do have strokes gained total for all this stuff. So we're going to throw this in. We'll call it SG long and easy. And this is more for looking at sleepers in that regard. But I wanted to throw that in there. We're going to reset our filters and get back to what we were looking for. What I want to look at now is that par 4 scoring. And I'm going to put in spike approach play rather than just overall approach play, because that didn't really seem to do us much good a year ago. Maybe that's a 1-year outlier. Shit happens when you party naked. But last 18 months, we're going to shrink that sample back down to, let's say, past 4 months. That seems like a pretty good territory. We got 40 rounds for some guys, 14 for guys like Ben Silverman, who's only in the field because he's Canadian. But the best par 4 scores in the field over the past 3 months, Harrington, and that's only from the PGA Championship, I believe, Ben Silverman, Fitzpatrick, Burns, Gim, Rose, Stanger, Fox. Fox is still up there. Shane Lowry, a lot of the guys who populated the top of the leaderboard a year ago, still up there right now. Noren, Fleetwood, Bridgman is another one, although Bridgman's been on a bit of a downturn. So we'll go, P4 short term, add, and then we are going to go into, we'll go long term on that as well. We'll go past, we've been using 18 months. Let's call it past 18 months. See if that changes who's at the top at all. Fleetwood, Mr. Anderson, Matthew Anderson, who only played this tournament last year, played really well in the par 4s. Rye, Lowry, Connors, Bezadenhout. So Bezadenhout is someone interesting here because he's been playing pretty reasonable golf as of late. Now, he was kind of the antithesis of what we were talking about, of the types of players that I would be targeting here, because he's usually pretty crap off the tee. Although, when you take a look at him, if it's a course where he can gain through accuracy, which is not often, he is the other type of player that can spike here. Now, I'm not going to be betting on Christian Bezadenhout this week. But as you can see, he can spike with his irons. He's usually pretty good on the greens. We go to total instead of average, and he's very good around the greens. So he's someone who can cobble together a very good strokes gained tee to green performance by not necessarily, if he has a -5 like he did at the PGA Championship, that ain't going to be no good. Same with the Byron Nelson. Not a course I love him for, but you can see how he can put together approach around the green with putting and try to be neutral around off the tee. Now, the problem is he's very rarely neutral off the tee. He's either good, good being relative here, but it's a lot of red and it's a lot of deep red. So I'm not going to be betting Bezadenhout, but you can see how that sort of player, Andrew Putnam would be the other one, although I think that he gains a bit more off the tee than Bezadenhout does, of how that profile can excel here. But it has so much to do with hot irons, hot putter. I don't like to bank on that for this tier of player. If we're talking about Scheffler, and hell, even Scheffler, has been out of sorts this year with his irons, but that was the one thing you can depend on him. Same as Morikawa. Like week after week, these guys gain with their irons. Can they gain elsewhere is always the big question. With Bezuidenhout, he's not necessarily going to gain with his irons a ton. But the long-term par 4 scoring, he is up there over the past 18 months. Burns, Noren, Fitzpatrick, Morikawa. There's Bobby Mack. There's Ryan Fox. Keith Mitchell. There's Baushu, shockingly enough. So maybe Baushu is a play here. There's A.J. Ewart again. Nikolai Højgaard. Stephen Fisk. Fisk is an interesting one because I don't know if CC of Jackson actually plays much into this, but just it's a very similar track. Not in terms of like course, but a very similar track to how guys end up winning that tournament. And I believe that was the Sanderson Farms was the Stephen Fisk type thing where, he shows up, he gains a bunch off the tee, gains a bunch on approach, and it finally has a good putting week. Dude, usually bad on the greens, has been amazing on the greens for like 2 months now. So when you take a look at this profile, what sticks out again? It is the driving and putting profile, and it's led to some pretty good finishes for him, honestly. I don't think that he is playing this week. Maybe he is in the field at Memorial based off that profile of how he's been doing. No, he's not. He did not play at the Memorial Tournament presented by Workday. But this is the sort of path that you're looking for of someone who can spike at a tournament like this. You need his approach play to be better, but if he can spike for that week, maybe you can get something out of him. We saw it for back-to-back tournaments. We did see a bit of a lead-in for him at the Pro Tour before he spiked at the Sanderson Farms. Are we seeing that coming in now? No, we are not. But we have seen him get better each of the past 3 weeks. Now, he's still in the negative, but he's slowly crawling out of that hole. But the driving has been very good, especially at driver-heavy courses. And the putting has been really good for him each of the past 5 weeks. Past 6 weeks, actually. 3, 3.2, 1.6, 3, and 7, trending upwards there. I wouldn't expect 7 strokes gain putting to continue. But if he can continue to do this 3, 3.5 off the tee, and then be right around there for strokes gained putting, like the 3.5, all of a sudden it makes him sort of live. He has a reasonable week on approach or around the greens. That's how we're going to find guys to get to the top of the leaderboard this week. So the long-term par 4, I'm going to chuck in SGP4 long. I put a colon in there. We'll put long-term in there as well. Now I want to go to spike approach and spike putting because we're setting this up to be guys who are really good off the tee and can find it somewhere else. So let's try to find a spike. And we do that by going to floor ceiling plays. And you can get each of the stats up here. Off the tee, tee to green, whatever it might be. So maybe we can throw in different things with this. We'll go to strokes gained, tee to green, and we'll say 2 or more. And this will be per round. Ben James, in his 8 rounds, he has gained over 2 strokes tee to green in 50% of his rounds. So in 4 of those 8 rounds, look at this pitcher. Look at this guy. Oh, yeah. That guy looks like he could win the Canadian Open right there. First event as a pro? Why not? But he is someone that I would take a look into here. Now, his putting stats have been horrendous for what we're looking for. But let's see here. How has he done at the U.S. Open? Last year's U.S. Open got cut, but gained a bunch tee to green, couldn't putt. Valero 2 years ago gained a bunch tee to green, couldn't putt. So Ben James never had a finish better than T33. So maybe not a look for this week, but that's very interesting that he kind of spiked there. The other guys who would do it, not shocking. If we sort by 2 tee to green, let's see. Alex Fitzpatrick is after Ben James, Rico Hoey, and then again, this is short term. That's past 18 months. If we shrink it down to past 4 months, take a look at more recent form, we're looking at Matt Fitzpatrick, the Fitzpatrick brothers. 1, 2, Brooks, Gim, Wrighton, Mitchell, Nikolai, Morikawa. There's Jackson Suber, so another name to throw back onto that list, and that's just tee to green. But should we overemphasize that? Yeah, hell, let's do it. Let's go spike tee to green. And we'll figure out how to do this a little bit later on because this is going to eat into approach and it's going to eat into everything else. So over the past 4 months, again, we're looking at strokes gained 2 or more in a round. So we're not looking necessarily for consistency. We're looking to someone to spike up and just have one of those weeks where they just hit it really, really well. Mark Hubbard, Nikolai Højgaard, Morikawa. Shockingly enough, that the best players for approach play, on a spike level basis are kind of the better approach players that we've seen over that time anyway. That's okay though, but we're just looking for a few outliers here. You see Eckroat, Keith Mitchell, there's Jackson Suber again, there's Tom Kim, there's Baushu. So we'll go spike approach. The other thing that you could look for in this regard is over 0%. So the more consistent players. There's different ways that you can put this through. And when you get your membership at BetspertsGolf.com, code Canada, get it for $1. You can play around with this any way that you want, and we'll take that with putting as well. So we'll even go for over 1 stroke gained on approach and around. See Burns, Mike Weir. Shout out Mike Weir in his 2 rounds at the Masters. Bridgman, Ewart, Hostler, Hughes, Cole, Whaley, Paul Waring, Robert McIntyre, Taylor Moore, Alex Noren. Where was Paul Waring the first round leader this year? Was it Valero, where he had that one amazing round, and then Cuss picked him to win, and he came like T30th? It wasn't round 1 there. Was it Valspar? I feel like he had maybe it was Houston. He had the round. It was Houston. Gained 6.62 strokes after being just absolutely abysmal. And he really hasn't done much since. He's the first tournament that he has played on tour since then. Just that name just kind of popped up in my mind when I saw that. McIntyre. And this is if we're looking at just strokes gained 1 or more stroke in a round. So we'll throw that in. We'll call that spike putting. It's not the spike of all spikes here. It's not 5 strokes gained putting or anything like that. I'm going to go back to approach and do the same thing. I'm not going to use 2. I'm going to use 1. And you see Fitzpatrick, Brooks, Suber, Luke Clanton, really. Nikolai Højgaard, of just guys that are consistently good at putting that up and can do it throughout the course of a round. You could probably mix that with the 4 strokes gained on approach, but guys that can just kind of churn out and every now and then pop up here. For strokes gained approach, 1+, we'll call it. And then we had putting in there as well. So now let's take a look at the model that we've been building to see how we're doing on that front. We're going to get rid of the 2 strokes gained on approach, or maybe we can keep them both in and just weight them the same as something else going into it. So this is what we got cooking right now. So the short-term form, off the tee, driver heavy off the tee, long and easy courses, short-term par 4, long-term par 4, spike tee to green, spike approach, spike putting, and approach 1+. So let's try to fill this out. So I love recent form. We'll call that 20%. Off the tee, we'll go 12 and 12 for short-term versus long-term driver heavy. Long and easy courses will go 10%. That par 4 will go 10 and 10. On that. Now we're not left with a ton, but we have 26% to divvy up between all those spikes that I did. We can just go 6, 6, 6, and we'll go 8 on the spike putting. We'll go 6 there because we've already kind of encapsulated tee to green between everything else that we're putting in. We don't need to overemphasize it. Now I probably don't have enough on approach based on what we see as the final thing. It's just it doesn't seem as predictive here as some of the other places. So we'll go Canada, Mayo, show model when you are a member at the rabbit hole, betspertsgolf.com. Code Canada for this week. If you go to expert models, you can see everything else that is put in there. This will be saved as an expert model. So you can pull up mine and then you can mess around with it if you really want to. You can add more stats to it, whatever it might be. We'll throw that in right now. We'll save and populate to see what the power rankings get us. Alex Fitzpatrick, Nikolai Højgaard, Christoph Reiten, Sam Burns, Keith Mitchell, Tommy Fleetwood, Brooks Koepka, Aaron Rai, Wyndham Clark, Matt Fitzpatrick, Michael Brennan, and Colin Morikawa. So Brennan is probably going to be the lowest in terms of odds on that list. Everyone else should be populated right around the center. It's giving us names that have won, have played pretty well, but fit this course really well. After that, we start getting into some deeper names. You see Stephen Fisk is 13, Mac Meisner is 18th, Thor Bjornsson, despite not running all that well recently, is 19th. On that list. Baoshu, who we've mentioned a few times, is 21st. Davis Thompson is interesting. That you would have to get him to putt, but he never putts, so that's tough. Chris Kirk, Alex Noren, there's Kevin Yu, Ewart, and Jordan Smith. Johnny Kiefer pops up again. We'll take a look at Johnny Kiefer player profile-wise. Tom Kim. You should check out Tom Kim's stats. They're kind of funny. There's Shipley, Yella Miraju. Not a lot of Canadians at the top of the slide. I think the best Canadian was actually Pendrith. And we'll see how Pendrith's been running as of late. And Yella Miraju was second, and then Ewart was second, then Yella Miraju, Nick Taylor down there as well. I don't know if JT Poston's going to play in this event if he ends up winning at Memorial. There's Jagger. So anyway, this is what we're looking at here. So let's take a look at some of the names that popped up near the top of that list. Michael Brennan being number 1. As I said, I'm betting this guy over and over. I bet you he opens probably around, I don't know, 50-1 because he's had, he was just top 10 at the Charles Schwab, which is funny because, it's a shorter course, but just when I looked at that Goddard profile, when I looked at the Burns profile, the Bobby Mack profile, not so much the Ryan Fox, but this is what you see from him is look at this off the tee. Look at this consistency off the tee. I know I've done this on the show, but if you're new watching this week, if he's in the U.S. Open, which I'm not sure that he is, I'm going to be betting Michael Brennan at the U.S. Open. Why wouldn't you? Looking at these numbers, this is a type of guy that could win a tournament like this. Betting him this week too. 4-2, 3-3, 4-2-2 off the tee. Getting better every week. The approach play, it comes and goes. At the PGA Championship, I feel like this was one bad round. Yeah, it was actually, the final round was really bad for him. Came 81st, just had a bad go of it on the weekend. That was at the PGA Championship. It's a hard course. But you can see the tee to green numbers, they can spike because of this off the tee. That's what you need here. Can you cobble together a great tee to green week? Somehow, yes, he can. And you see him do it with approaches every now and then. His approach play is not good. It's not bad. It's just wildly inconsistent. But now we're seeing something that we didn't see earlier in the year. So he won at the Bank of Utah. Of course, I just played the Black Desert. Awesome course. I can see how he won there and gained 7.6 strokes off the tee. That actually makes a ton of sense after you've played that course. But just -4, -2, -2, -2 putting, -3 putting. Those are still in there. As you can see, PGA Championship, -4. The putting's been sneakily been getting better, though. At the Masters, he lost a bunch, but still came T24. CJ Cup, he missed the cut, 0.7 strokes, lost on putting, but gained over 5 last week. Gained at the Heritage. Gained in Houston. We'll see how he does this week, but if he can have another good putting week, he's going to be firmly in the mix this week. Michael Thorbjornsen was a player that popped up for us on that list. We'll see how he's been doing as of late. He does not putt well on POA, so that's not a good sign. He played in this tournament last year. Let's see how he did. He was second in Punta Cana last year. He was cut from this tournament a year ago, but did putt well on these greens. He was another one that you would expect him. Brendan kind of took his place as that young player who's amazing off the tee, and then Koivin's going to take their place more often than not. The approach play turned on him after he was in contention a bunch, but turned it around at the Schwab. The driving has been good to great outside of the Cadillac Championship. And again, I won't say he fell victim of playing against the best players in the world, but you see in these run of 3 straight events where he played signature events and majors, didn't go well for Michael Thorbjornsen. The other events, he did pretty well. And the approach play had been good all year except for those events. Did not do well at the CJ Cup, Byron Nelson. But you can see the putter turn, but it had been pretty decent throughout the course of the year. If he can get back to these elite levels at driving, so driver-heavy course at the Schwab, gained a bunch off the tee. Players is not a driver-heavy course. He still gained a bunch there. If he can get that back, then yeah, absolutely. I understand why he popped up pretty well in that regard. Johnny Kiefer is another one. It's going to be tough to take a guy with this headshot too seriously. He's like in the Ben James category of weird headshots, but putts well on POA, if nothing else. The putter has been better as of late, and you can see that early season ball striking has started to come back. Dude can't chip to save his life. It's a real problem. But if we go back to the course. I didn't look at the course data for green regulation percentage. I think it's really high. I would guess it's really high here. Let's see. Approach play for TPC Toronto, green and regulation from last year. From the fairway, 81%, 72% overall versus 66. So easier to hit than normal. Greens and regulation could help out a player like Johnny Kiefer, who, again, as I mentioned, does have a T3 at this course on the PGA of America's tour back when he played those. But when you see the big negatives for him, where were they? Masters, RBC Heritage Signature Event, and short course. Not a driver-heavy course at the PGA Championship. Lost there, although he did make the cut. T9 at the Byron Nelson. T3 in Houston earlier this year. These would be the tournaments that I would be looking at more. Similar fields. And I mentioned Myrtle Beach earlier. Gained a bunch off the tee, gained a bunch on approach. Couldn't chip, couldn't putt. It's been his MO. Can he plug his pour around the green play? We did not see around the green play factor in all that much to the leaderboard a year ago. So the ball striking is there right now. He is trending upwards, and the putter has been there each of the past 2 weeks. If he doesn't chip himself out of the tournament, big ask when you take a look at this right now, but it is all there lining up for him to have a really good week. Tom Kim, mind you, I was talking about, up on the screen now. We can see that the approach play has been really good. The putter has been off, and the driver comes and goes. But the the putting is getting a little bit better. The approach play, I mean, he wasn't going to gain 7 strokes or an average 6 strokes a week with his approach play. The ball striking has been good for him coming in a lot in that Max Homa regard, that if you get a good enough number, not bad. Let's take a look at Taylor Pendrith from Richmond Hill, Ontario. Might as well call that, next to the course, because, it's in Toronto proper in Richmond Hill, so you got to be close, right? Nat hasn't really been very good for him, but he's had some spike weeks off the tee. He's had some spike weeks on approaches. The chipping's been really bad. And the putter's starting to get a little bit better. Not quite sure what he's been up to at TPC Toronto. Or not TPC Toronto, at the Memorial, sorry. Taylor Pendrith is, for the tournament, if we take a look at it right now, bad around the greens, good off the tee, pretty good putting. So the off the tee and putting has been pretty good for him, honestly, coming in, just like it has been for Nick Taylor, where Nick Taylor has been terrible around the greens and terrible on approach, but gaining on putting and gaining off the tee. So all very interesting in that regard if we're looking for it. So that is the research show. I took a look more at that mid-tier to long-term and the skills of players that we're looking at, because when we get the odds on the board, I haven't looked at them yet, but I'm going to guess it's Ludwig, it's Matt Fitzpatrick, it's Sam Burns and Wyndham Clark, Morikawa and Victor Hovland. They make the most sense at the top of this board. Honest to God. But I do think that this is a week, unless one of those guys if one of those guys goes and plays their A- game, they're going to win. But in lieu of that, especially off what we saw last year when none of those guys were in contention, I do think that we can take a shot on one of these players down the board with big driving stats, decent putting stats, and spiking somewhere in between, that those guys can have a very reasonable chance of winning at TPC Toronto for the RBC Canadian Open. Smash like, give me your winner in the comment section. The article will be out on Sunday evening following the Memorial Tournament. Jeff and I will be back in the morning. If you haven't checked out the World Cup show here with me, Cust, and the gang, please check it out. I thought it was a lot of fun. Real soccer hardos got up in arms about it, but fuck them, who cares? I thought it was a really fun show, and people thought they had a few good laughs, learned a few good things, and hey, we're off to the races. World Cup starts this week. All right, I'm Pat Mayo. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
Mayo Experience! Experience!